Hey everyone, it's Phil here with StoneWater Training, and just wanted to get you up to speed on some recent developments we've had. So we just hit our year in business. That was August 1st, and the team has progressively grown. We've added more clients, and we've brought in some pretty neat folks to help us round things out. What I love is the folks we have on board are all about the mission. We're not chasing numbers here. We're trying to make an impact, and it's pretty consistent. We start our meetings going about, hey, what is our purpose? What are our values? How do we execute and achieve an impact, with the folks who trust us to partner with them? So part of that has been bringing on board, people who are different, but have, the same principles, the same stories, and can contribute. And really excited to announce the most recent addition to the team is Brian Warren. And if you're in the mountaineering community, you might already know about Brian, but he's been a worldwide guide, has been doing it for 20 plus years, and just has an incredible story. And he's been leading people up and down mountains for decades, and we came into connection through a mutual friend, and now he is on the StoneWater team. We just wrapped up, it's probably about an hour and a half conversation, talking about sort of his origin story, which is incredible. And I love it because here's a spoiler alert, but some of the takeaways were, kind of stepping onto the trail in the 100-mile wilderness, basically kind of the concept of make that leap. And when failure is not an option, you're guaranteed to succeed. Second thing we really talked about is the importance of mentors, the people you have around you, and the people that you strive to be like, and then not being afraid to reach out to them and give it a shot. And then we talked about this whole concept of trying new, hard things. Even when you're scared, you're unsure, you're not ready, like it starts off hard, and then you build routines and become comfortable, and then it becomes easy. And then you have to go looking for new hard things and continuing to do that thing. So StoneWater Training, I don't know, I hope it's not a hard thing for him, but I think it's the new thing as he goes from leading in the mountains to leading with the mountains now as a backdrop, but really focus on developing individuals, leaders, and teams to be purpose-driven, value-based, and make an impact whatever their arena is. So stay tuned, check that video out. It's coming up later. We're going to start churning out some more of these videos on probably, I'd say, a monthly basis, maybe a little more frequently if the opportunity arises, not just with internal StoneWater team members, but we also want to share some of the incredible people we work with and support. So again, Phil, founder of StoneWater. Bear with us, we're in the backyard, we've got the dog barking, birds in the background, but this is life. We strive to be authentic, we're succeeding to a T right now. But until next time, have a great one. Out. Brian, so good to have you. So please tell the folks who are out there in internet land, tell us about yourself. Who is Brian?
Good question. Still trying to figure that one out. But very pleased to be here with StoneWater. I appreciate the introduction. Obviously, these past few months, we've been getting to know each other and looking forward to building the future of StoneWater and all the programs that I know are circling in our heads. But yeah, so I guess in the world of StoneWater and climbing mountains and leading folks in the outdoors, young Brian, right? I think back to going to a climbing gym at a birthday party. I was probably 10, 11 years old. That certainly led to wanting to be outside, wanting to get into rock climbing. I remember it was, not long after it being introduced to a climbing gym, it was wanting a climbing harness and a climbing rope for Christmas that year, which led to a lot of outdoor adventures during high school. Ultimately led to...
And where was high school? Like, where are you at geographically at this point growing up?
The mountainous region of Atlanta, Georgia.
Nice.
Right? Where all the skiing and mountaineering...
It's called the Alps of the East, I think.
Alps of the East, exactly. So yeah, not any iconic mountain range, but even as a child, had the thirst for wanting to get outside and adventure and and see the bigger mountains. My parents, for better or worse, went along with this idea to let me through hike the Appalachian Trail upon graduating high school. So I speak to this because that truly is a catalyst and sort of the tipping point, right, of where am I going, where have I been.
Yeah, most people start with car camping or things like that. I like that you're like, okay, what am I going to do after high school? I'm going to hike the Appalachian Trail.
Exactly.
So go big or go home.
And it was that. Had done a lot of car camping with the family. I didn't come from a background or a family that was into the outdoors. You know, father was in computer programming. Mother worked in administration. So there was this inner calling, right? There was this drive to, like, what is a climbing rope and what can you do with it? And what is rappelling? And what is backpacking? And before the thru hike, honestly, it was car camping, some day hikes with the family, but it never camped more than 3 nights consecutively, right? So at the age of 18, 4 days after graduating high school, my father and I flew up to Maine and were there for a couple of days buying supplies, figuring out what am I about to endeavor into, and climbed Mount Katahdin. Came down. We had a big meal that night, packed up the pack, and this is something that, you know, I've told a lot of people because it's the catalyst. It was the diving board, right? However you want to explain it. It's like that was the starting line for me. And that was driving out to the trailhead after climbing Katahdin, getting out of the rental car, putting the pack on my shoulders. And for those of you that know the Appalachian Trail or maybe know of it, most people go Georgia to Maine. They say it's a little bit easier. Not that many people go Maine to Georgia because the first 100 miles in Maine is called the 100-mile wilderness, and there's no chance to resupply. And so with that said, you've got roughly 7 to 10 days worth of food. So pretty heavy pack. So shouldering that pack as an 18-year-old, 4 days after high school graduation, gave Dad a hug, walked in, saw the big sign, huge billboard, more or less. You're entering the 100-mile wilderness. Must be prepared. You know, all the be prepared for this, be prepared for that.
Scariest environment imaginable.
Exactly. And for me, it was terrifying. So therefore, I turned right around, walked back to the road, and the car was gone.
Love it.
Dad was not waiting. Dad was not there. Car was gone. There was no like, hey, let me allow you a little bit of hesitation.
So were you genuinely having second guesses,
Totally.
like as you sort of started moving down the trail, going, "What am I doing?"
Yeah,
I didn't. That's pretty.
Shouldering,
that's pretty cool.
You know, 50+ pound pack, brand new boots, not broken in. Again, it never camped, more than 3 or 4 nights, and here I was entering in this whole new world, right?
And you were totally solo. It's not like you had high school friends or girlfriend or something.
Yeah,
with
so
you.
I decided to do this. Obviously, couldn't talk any friends into it. Most of my family and friends thought I was a bit off for taking on this challenge right after high school. I think most people get, a summer job and then enter college.
Yeah, my son plays Grand Theft Auto for about 18 hours a day after high school. So I'm encouraging him to do the Appalachian Trail solo. He hasn't picked up on that yet. I do want to acknowledge that. I think it's really cool that your parents, especially because it wasn't like they were mountaineers who had done Everest or climbed around the world. Like they, sounds like kind of standard suburban family.
Yep.
Did some low intensity camping now and again. If they're like me, they do it to save money because it's cheaper in a hotel room. You tell the kids it's an adventure, but really it's about economics. But then they totally supported you on this pretty aggressive goal right out the gate.
Pretty amazing.
That's awesome. I love it. And then they ditched you at the trailhead.
They ditched me at the trailhead.
He didn't give you that lifeline.
Yeah. He's like, if you're doing it, then do it. And I think about that all the time, right? Like any challenge that I've had to face, I can picture that 100-mile wilderness sign. Because for me, that was, okay, I'm stepping into this new realm. Again, walked back out, had some hesitation, and then didn't have a choice, right? So headed on down the trail, and that, again, I talk about that being the starting point for so much, because for the next 4.5 months, it was, every day was different. Every day was terrifying, moments of complete fear, moments of complete joy, smiles, tears. Days of just crying while hiking, wondering, like, where's the next stream? Where's the next hut? Now, obviously, there's a massive community, right? And that, I think that was another huge point in my life of realizing, like, I've got to talk to strangers. I've got to get to a trailhead and stick my thumb out and hitch into town and figure out where's the grocery store. And this was all, we had payphones. This was pre-cell phone. The technology I had was one of those yellow Sony Walkmans.
Yes.
With the armband.
Yeah. In the protected case.
In the protected case.
Those were cool.
Right. So this was the year 2000. So not a ton of technology. Wasn't wearing a GPS. Didn't have a smartphone. Had a couple of books that mentioned at 7.2 miles there's a stream. At 10.9 miles there's a hut. So as I headed down the trail, meeting people from all over, meeting people from all sorts of industries and ages and demographics and backgrounds, and ultimately, where I started gaining a little more clarity of maybe what the future looked like was meeting folks that worked for organizations like Knowles and Outward Bound. Because again, growing up in the Alps of the East, no one ever talked about, outdoor
That's
education.
trademark StoneWater, by the way. Alps of the East, we own that term now for the hills in the Atlanta area. A lot of them are just parking garages.
Join us.
Yeah.
Alps of the East. Yeah, so I remember meeting, there was a gentleman by the name of Tim. Couldn't tell you his last name. A lot of folks had trail names. I was starting to pick up the nickname from some other hikers that I was moving with. Ironically, being the young one, being 18 years old, and a lot of these folks are, late 20s, mid 30s, sometimes, mid 40s, mid 50s. But when you have someone like that calling you, hey, Papa, like, where's the next trailhead, or which town should we try to resupply in, or how far is the hut tonight? I started gaining confidence, right, as an 18-year-old. And again, meeting people that had worked in these realms of outdoor education, I started recognizing that maybe there is a path here.
So I just want to go back to the part where, people are asking you for information, like the youngest kid on the trail.
Yep.
And they're asking you for this detailed stuff. So have you always been fairly detail-oriented and sort of pragmatic and sort of method-focused? Love that.
Yes. And that was where, I was the one that, like, ordered all the maps and ordered every book possible. And I was the one always looking at, the resources of, like, okay, well, what are the logistics of today? What are the logistics of tomorrow? Because this is, ultimately it's a marathon, right? And this massive goal of not knowing if it was going to happen or not. But if I can plan each day and sort of each week, I'll eventually end up in Georgia.
Wait, can I go back to, maybe this is like the most basic question, but what was the motivation to do it? Like, what triggered? Again, most people graduate high school and they're thinking about what college they're going to go to, or what job they're going to start, or how long they can get away with living in their parents' basement. What were you looking for? Why? I'm going to do the Appalachian Trail because I climbed at a birthday party and decided I kind of like mountains. Like, just what was the thought process there?
I think like many folks, whether it was an inner voice, right? didn't really know what I wanted to do, right? Like most high schoolers, you're like, well, if I go to college, what am I going to focus on? And for me, I had actually seen a story in the local newspaper about this younger guy. He had graduated college, and after college, he had hiked the Appalachian Trail. I actually never met him, knew of his family, but I just remember that news article, and I remember bringing that to my parents. And so that, in combination of not really having a plan, I think basically subconsciously morphed into, hey, I think this would be an amazing experience. And it's hard to verbalize what that action step was, right? But for me, I remember going to my parents and saying, I think I want to try this.
Was it like you wanted to see if you could, or you were looking
Totally.
for clarity as you didn't have direction coming out of high school? I mean,
all the above, right?
Wow.
I think that inner drive of, yeah, can I do this? Looking for the unknown. Wondering, like, what will this lead to, right? And so again, under this umbrella of, I have no idea what I'm doing at this point. I'm buying all this gear.
LL Bean made a killing on you.
They did. Yeah. My dividend at REI was huge during high school. And leading into the trip, obviously. Yeah. 100 pounds of the lightest weight equipment known to man at the time. So yeah, looking back, it was one of those moments again, and that's why I say, like, that was a starting line for me. I don't know what inside was telling me to do this. Obviously, I had some outside prompts, like the news article. But yeah, it was somehow convinced my parents, like, I think this is right. And I think this is going to lead to something bigger and better. But again, as an 18-year-old, like, how do you verbalize that?
Yeah, it's pretty hard to articulate as a 40-something-year-old having a conversation here.
Yeah.
So another question I have for you, because you talked about, hey, I got to the trailhead, I saw the signs, all the warnings, and I don't know if you'd ever like camped solo before or not. It sounds like if you had, it wasn't a whole lot. But you stepped off this trail and then you were like, what the hell am I doing?
Yeah.
And then you went back and your dad was gone. But then, because you had no option, you're like, all right, I guess I'm doing this, at least the first 100 miles.
Yep.
Which I think there's a great lesson there. It's amazing what we're capable of when failure is not an option.
Exactly.
Like, I've seen that over and over. It's like, well, you've got to do this. And you're like, but I don't want to. And it's like life in the world doesn't care what you want.
Yeah.
There is no option at this point. So there's this key lesson there. Maybe we'll expand on that down the road. But I want to know what kept you going. Did you say 4 months? Is that how long it took? 4 or 5 months?
4.5 months.
Okay.
Yeah.
So I don't know the stats, but I'm assuming most people who start the through hike don't complete it, or at least a significant percentage don't.
Yeah.
That's just an assumption. What kept 18-year-old Brian getting up, every day and stepping? Because I'm sure not. I mean, you said I was scared some days. I was stressed. I was anxious. I'm sure lonely.
Yep.
Questioning yourself. What kept you stepping as an 18-year-old? I mean, that's pretty unique, I think.
Yeah, there were a lot of miserable days. Ultimately, I had set a goal for myself. And again, I wasn't sure if I was going to complete the trail in its entirety. But between meeting folks, having that motivation around me, right? I think you start to feel that accountability. And, growing up playing tennis and wrestling, and yes, you're working in kind of solo team sports, but you're also working on a team. And so I felt a lot of that of like, well, I've got these new sort of counterparts and I don't want to let them down. Don't want to let myself down. And ultimately for me, finishing it I was like, I want to know what I'm made of. I want to know, can I do this? Can I walk almost 2,200 miles self-supported? And it proved to be an amazing experience, an amazing journey. Met people from all over that I still stay in contact with. But yeah, there were so many days that I was like, I can't do it. I'm done. Like, I'd get to a payphone and scratch off the little AT&T card and call mom and dad and be like, I don't know about this. This is big, and this is bigger than me. But again, thankfully, it was like some of the people I met. You start to get in the rhythm, right? And like, this is life, and you get to whether you get to a hut that night or you decide to camp next to a stream or a lake, and you get into the routine, and that becomes life. And sure, it was riding that rhythm was a huge high every day. You're like, this is amazing.
Mm-hmm.
I'm seeing parts of the country that a lot of people will never see. And even off the trail, right? Like you would hitch into town and go to a grocery store, and people were so generous and so kind and so supportive, right? And so you get hitched back to the trail, and you're like, well, I gotta go the next 20 miles, right? I mean, this guy was the guy that picked me up and took me to the grocery store. Like, I want to prove to him that
I
can do
owe
this.
him. Yeah.
Yeah.
That's so it's fascinating because you said several things there. First off, you're like, hey, you were inspired by someone else's story. So what triggered this whole journey was, hey, someone else did this and it was impactful to them. So I want to try it out. A little bit of the, hey, can I do this? Like, this is an audacious goal. But then you got on the trail, it was the people you met kind of built you up. And I think that's so, like, spot on.
Yeah.
Like, a lot of times we're influenced, whether we like it or not, positive or negative, by who we're around and who we're interacting with.
Sure.
They can bring us up, bring us down, especially over time. So that's cool. But I also like the rhythm. So like building a structure, not so much a physical structure, but building that rhythm and that sequence of, this is what I do. I set up camp at this time. I have dinner. My routine to get everything prepped for the night. Here's what I do in the morning. And it's just like, okay, like this is just life. You accept it.
Yep.
And then you accept it, and then you start seeing the beauty in it, and then you appreciate it for what it is. I just want to share, because I've sort of bumped into this both myself and hearing you talk and other people, we've worked with. And that's a lot of times you start something hard, and at first it's just hard and it's painful and you don't want to do it. And a lot of times it's other people that keep you in the mix, whether it's a workout partner or someone studying the same course or whatever it is, coworkers, who knows. And then you get into a rhythm and you're like, okay, this is life. Is it good? Is it bad? I don't know, but it's just what I do.
Yep.
And then you sort of plateau there for a bit. And then all of a sudden you start seeing the beauty and start appreciating it for what it is. And so it went from hard to routine, from routine to amazing.
Totally.
And then you get to the end of it, if it's something that has an end, like a trail, and you're like, okay, well now what? Like, that was huge. Like, you skewed the rest of your life. You wrecked the curve as an 18-year-old doing something that, I hope I do before I'm 70. But sorry, I got excited by some of the stuff you're saying. So I'm like, that's...
Yeah. And don't get me wrong. Like, at 18 years old, did I recognize any of that? No. Right. Did I have a background or history, or had I read books about leadership or routine? No. And I remember, I think it was 3 nights into the trail, 3 nights into the 100-mile wilderness, I came across this couple from Florida, and totally, foot in mouth, right? Like, they're like, oh, great to meet you. And we're, chatting, and we're all starting to cook dinner. And his name was Bill. He's like, so you're 18. Like, why are you doing this? And I stupidly said, like, well, I don't want to, be 35 and have a bunch of regrets in my life. And how old was Bill?
That was his
35.
His 35th birthday party was that night. You're not invited anymore, Brian.
And I wasn't even aware of that, right? Like, I didn't have those social cues to pick up on, like, you're being a total jackass. Like, you sound like a spoiled brat. So yeah, I think for many of us, right, whether it's college sports, team sports, high school sports, academics, right? Like, if we find something we're interested in and we latch onto it, and we want to push ourselves in that realm. And again, like, hiking the trail for me, I can't, like you said, articulate why, but all those lessons became apparent, right? And so you look 2,200 miles later, completing the trail, tons of blisters, tons of had numerous ingrown toenails, issues with feet.
There's children listening. Like, please.
Every day you're like, oh, my legs are fatigued. Like, how far we have to go today? Or, and thankfully, every day it was choose your own adventure, right? Do I hike 3 miles today? Our biggest day, I say our biggest day because at this point I'd found a pretty solid crew that I was moving with. We did 52 miles one day.
Wow.
And it was called the Maryland Challenge. So it was like you basically hiked the distance of the trail in the state of Maryland. So yeah, you could challenge yourself. You could back off. You could take a rest day. You could maybe stay in town a little bit longer and get a hotel and get a nice meal. So you had all these choices that you were making every single day. And a little bit of a tangent, but I go back to that thinking of the sign of the wilderness, the 100-mile wilderness. And then the other mantra that's stayed with me throughout life since hiking the trail is I call it life in a backpack. And if it's not in your pack, you probably don't need it. Mm-hmm. It's probably why I'm so OCD around the house or in the garage and everything has its place. But for me, that's carried on through, work, through relationships, through, moving to different places. You focus on what you actually need, right? Which ultimately for me, it becomes like, well, what do you want? You kind of want less when it comes to things. So as you mentioned, there's all these principles that came out of hiking the trail that I wasn't aware of until after the fact. And meeting the folks I did, that was another starting line for me, right? I talked about Tim, who worked for Outward Bound. I was like, what do you do for Outward Bound? And, he's like, well, I get to go mountaineering and sea kayaking and backpacking. And I work with people from high school all the way up until their 50s and 60s. And we run programs all over the world. You talk about places I'd never heard of. So fast forwarding a little bit, I talk about Tim because the next step after the trail, like you mentioned, like, well, now what? You finish this goal. And as soon as I got home, I was ordering catalogs from Outward Bound and Knowles, looking at, what are these courses I can take as a student, or could I become an instructor for one of these organizations? And so coming off of the trail, again, I still didn't know what college was going to look like. My parents had obviously gotten used to me coming with them with some strange idea of next steps. Attempted college, but really was more focused on
Didn't want to try swimming the Atlantic? I mean, doing that little challenge after doing the Appalachian Trail? I mean...
Not a water guy.
Yeah, understood.
Yeah, and so bringing like a Knowles catalog to the attention of my parents, they weren't going to change my mind at that point, right? Like I had hiked the Appalachian Trail, had met all these amazing people, wanted to continue those relationships, right? And even there were a couple of guys that I'd met on the trail that were like, we should do Knowles. And then I remember one of them, this guy Sam from Tennessee, is like, we should climb Denali, right? Let's swim the Atlantic.
Yeah.
I'm like, yeah, we should climb Denali.
What's Denali?
Where is Denali?
We should do it, yeah.
I love Moose Tracks ice cream. What? Where are we going? What are we doing? So that was sort of the next step. I was like, well, Knowles has courses in Alaska. I've never been to Alaska. Never seen Alaska. That's where Denali is, right? So after the trail, it was working at a pizza kitchen, working at a backpacking store, actually helping other hikers prepare for through hikes. I was framing houses, working at a hardware store, working multiple jobs to save up some money for said Knowles course, right? And so here I am now bumping up against 19 years old, convinced my parents, hey, I'm going to sign up for this 28-day Knowles course in Alaska, 28-day mountaineering course. There they were again, being super supportive. I'm sure,
You have really cool parents, by the way. I just
can't
think we should call it
imagine.
out.
Yeah, I can't imagine the conversations behind closed doors. Like, do we send him to therapy?
Yeah. What's he looking for?
What is he looking for? Who is he talking to? But yeah, I mean,
It was that damn birthday party when he was 11, wasn't it?
It truly was. And I do joke, right? Because everyone's like, well, how did you get into climbing? I was like thousands of others. I went to a climbing gym, at a birthday party.
Yeah, it was two paths diverged at that birthday party. You could have gone for climbing, which you did, or you could have gone for birthday cake, which,
Exactly.
you know, so I guess either or. We have Brian the Baker on here otherwise.
We could have Brian the Baker. I'm glad I chose climbing.
So Denali with Knowles, now you're going from, so you have the journey of self-discovery, you know, on the Appalachian Trail. In 19-year-old self would probably rolled his eyes and said, no, I just want to do this before I'm 35.
Yep.
At which point I would just wish I was 35 again. So you have this journey of self-discovery, amazing self-leadership, pushing yourself to do something that you couldn't even articulate why, but you just did it. People pulled you along, you got into a rhythm, you saw the beauty in it, and then it became normal. And then you wanted more, which led to Denali. Now you're learning skills to lead others in Denali, which you had never been to Alaska or heard of it before.
Yep.
So one challenge, one door keeps leading to another. You finished Denali, the Knowles course, then what?
So yeah, finished the Knowles course. Again, walked away from that experience just completely enamored with mountains, right? Traveling through mountains.
And Denali is the highest point in North
So the
America?
course wasn't actually on Denali. It was near Denali.
I would need to re-record this whole thing then.
I know. Huge letdown. Denali came later in life. But we were in the Eastern Alaskan Range, had some amazing instructors. Actually still stay in touch with 2 out of the 3 instructors a fair bit. Some of the students as well.
I love that part about your story that you've hit on again and again, that like these are people that like 20 plus years ago that you still are in touch with now. And it's because these shared experiences, right?
For
like
sure.
they, you know, felt the challenge, felt the adventure, felt the pain, felt the, it's which is obviously what we try to do in StoneWater is, hey, how do we replicate these situations that, you know, this shared experience that will forge bonds of these leaders from different realms. So I love that you're like referring to Tim from like 22 years ago or whatever it is, which is super cool. And don't judge my math on how many years ago it was, but
yeah, if for those folks that have been in the mountains with me, I often say, if it's not, you know, once or twice or maybe 1,000 times while we're out in the mountains together, suffering comfort. And you touch on those relationships, right, that have lasted for all these years. For me, that idea of like suffering comfort with the people you're with, suffering comfort knowing that the things in your pack are going to get you through today and tomorrow and next week, suffering comfort knowing you've done harder. And you can do harder. And this is a whole nother topic that I look forward to really exploring with StoneWater is this idea of like suffer and comfort. It's going to be hard and it's probably going to suck, but you're going to be comfortable.
So, you know, I come from a different background, but I definitely appreciate and see parallels, at least I think, in your world to mine. And one of the principles I've found is a lot of times what's hard in the moment is what makes, you know, in the long run is good for us. Whether it's a really hard experience that makes us stronger, wiser, tougher down the road, or that we can share it with someone else. And it's almost like that. That's not. It's kind of like your suffering comfort, but you had some different angles on that too. But I'm curious if you found it that way. And then the inverse I found true too. Generally, what's easy in the moment hurts me over long run. If I eat what I want, what I feel like right now, maybe it's my taste buds aren't wired right, but like I want to eat junk. I could have like 40 pounds of McDonald's fries and be a happy camper. It's not going to help me in the long run when I have a heart attack at 51. But that whole like is that a consistent thing for you? Like, hey, what what's challenging now will pay off in spades down the road.
Absolutely.
So.
Yeah, and I think that's the whole, when I say suffer and comfort, right? That premise of do the hard work up front and you're going to have the payoff.
Yep.
You're going to have that dividend. You're going to have that return, whether it's
Much conciser said than I was word tap dancing around. So thank you.
eat healthy, feel better. Move your body, feel better, right? And going back to those, we're touching on relationships, right? It was like Noel's course for 28 days. Met a whole new group of people that I've, you form these bonds with. During each Noel's course, the last few days or even week of a course, and I'm touching on this because it's the theme of sort of entering the 100-mile wilderness, and then growing as not only a single person, but as a part of a community. The way it's set up is that the instructors have taught you all these skills. You've been moving through the mountains, learning everything about mountaineering and avalanche hazard and crevasse hazard. And then the last few days, I think it was a 4 or 5 day, basically student-led expedition. So they sort of cut you loose. And this is very, I guess, Survivor-esque. It's like you're voted by, you let the people speak. And so all the students get a vote. They vote for 2 student leaders that will then, you'll divide the course, and you have two new parties, right? And thankfully, to my benefit, I was wanting the title, right? Because that was one of the main reasons. Like, hey, I'm taking this course. I want to learn these skills. I want to learn about leadership. I want to be the guy out there on the front of the rope team. And so I was voted one of the student-led instructors. And then the 3 main Noel's instructors basically part ways. They tell you, like, we're at point A. In 5 days' time, you got to be at point B. See you there. And walking away from that experience, again, I was 19, and
yeah.
I remember there was folks, and they're probably someone 35 years old.
Hopefully you didn't bring up the age thing to them and get a little self-conscious as we get older.
No regrets by age 37.
Yeah.
But yeah, there I was again. It was 19 years old, and again, looking back, I can see the benefits of all this. When I was there, I wasn't picking up on these skills and the leadership mentality, or it was an amazing opportunity. And especially I remember debriefing with the other students, debriefing with the instructors, and just coming off of an almost 30-day experience with what felt like a lifetime of values and skill sets.
I love the trajectory because it's very similar to some of the training paths and models we follow, which is the journey begins with self-awareness. Where am I? Where am I in life? I'm in the Alps of the East. I'm sitting here in suburban Atlanta, or Stone Mountain, Georgia, wherever it is,
Yep.
and going, okay, it's where I'm at. Where do I want to be? What's important to me? And for you, it was like I want adventure. I want to be unusual. I want to be abnormal. I want to push my limits and see where they are. And then you begin that. You went from self-awareness to now it's self-leadership.
Yeah.
With a little bit of help from Dad, who, you didn't burn your boats on the beach. He burned them when he peeled out of there.
Yeah.
So, like, there's no turning back. Like, here you are. I just love the image of you at the entrance of the 100-mile wilderness. Like, oh, man, did I really sign up for this? Okay. Well, there's no way back, so I guess I'll just move forward, which, again, tons of parallels there.
Yeah.
But now you're doing the self-leadership piece. You come out. Now you have to reorient, build self-awareness. Okay, I just had a life-changing experience. What do I want to do with that? And you're like, I want more. I want harder.
Yeah.
And now you get in the Noel's course, and now you're experienced. Now you're starting to practice leading others. So fast forward, and just because I think we could unpack like a month of Brian's life to like a 2-hour talk. But you go from Noel's, where you didn't climb Denali, for the record, but we get to that later. But you go from there to now, when we meet, I hear about this. We can get into how we linked up, but when you come to the table, it's like you guided on Everest. Oh, you've guided combat veterans and amputees up Everest. I'm like, okay, that's different. You've guided on every single continent at the highest points, and you've led famous people that listeners would be aware of. So, what was the trajectory of that from not climbing Denali to summiting Everest and leading teams up Kilimanjaro and everything else? Like, what's the 3-minute story on how the heck that happened? Because
Yeah.
that's a ton of growth.
So it was probably only about 3 minutes out of the Knowles course that I was already thinking, okay, trajectory. What is next? What's the next big step? What's the next goal? And for my benefit, the instructors for that mountaineering course had chose to use ski touring equipment versus snowshoes. So I pretty much placed the blame on them. My parents can blame them as well. But being introduced to this whole new mode of travel in the mountains, ski touring equipment, led to pretty much on the flight home from Alaska back to Georgia after this Knowles course thinking, I want to go skiing.
Had you skied before?
About 4 days total.
Okay.
I actually placed a lot of the blame on my aunt and uncle that
Yeah, we're gonna have to talk about the concept of personal ownership at a later one of these, but that's okay. For right now, you can blame your aunt.
pointing
and
the
uncle.
fingers all day long at family. You took me skiing in Colorado at age 8. You let me hike the Appalachian Trail. So coming home after Knowles, the trajectory was and now my parents are really getting used to it, right?
Yeah.
Knocking on the door. Hey, I have this idea. Eyes roll in the back of their head. Where are you going now? What do you think about Wyoming? Dad grew up hunting out in Pinedale. Like my brother Steven and I have heard all these stories about Wyoming. Sounds amazing. What do you think about me driving to Wyoming next month? There's a job fair at Jackson Hole Mountain Resort. I'm sure I can get a job there doing something on skis. So now, 20 years old, driving out to Wyoming, sight unseen, no job, no place to live, no source of income, no skis.
It'll buff out.
It's all going to work out. Life in a backpack. My mom's like, I think you should get a topper for your truck. I think it snows there.
I think at this ski town you're going to, this little Jackson, I think it's called. I think it
Yeah.
snows there. Yeah.
So
Moms are wise.
prior to driving to Jackson, Wyoming, when I had been gathering this plethora of magazines from Outward Bound and Knowles and all these outdoor companies, La Sportiva and MSR and the REI catalogs, I had gotten on some mailing list, or maybe I contacted them, Jackson Hole Mountain Guides. I was like, oh, these guys run programs in Wyoming in the Tetons. Oh, they take people skiing and they take people mountaineering, and a bunch of them are Knowles instructors. And the founder of Knowles, Paul Petzel, has a huge history of getting Jackson Hole Mountain Guides up and running.
Knowles is it in Lander?
It is based in
Okay.
Lander.
Yeah, I thought so.
Yeah, so there's all these, unbeknownst to me, as I'm starting to enter this world, coming from a Knowles course and driving to Wyoming, the path is not laid out for me, but there's all these opportunities that arose and thankfully happened with the people I met, signing up for more courses. So here I am, 20 years old, moved to Jackson Hole, Wyoming, again, sight unseen, went to the job fair. I can blame them too, right? Because
Sure.
they believed me.
becoming a
They
trend.
believed that I could ski, and I'd only ever skied on really lightweight ski touring equipment. And so I got a job as a lift operator, like many folks do, and had to go buy some skis. And ultimately decided, well, if I can only get one set of skis, I might as well get some ski touring skis and ski touring bindings and ski touring boots, which for those of you that ski or maybe grew up skiing or ski race, it's basically like learning how to ski on cross-country equipment. Not advised. So with a couple of weeks into the first winter in Jackson, being exposed to folks that lived in the town there, and ski patrol, Knowles instructors, mountaineering guides, ski guides, heli ski guides. And you're exposed to this just working at the resort, right? Sort of the celebrities in the mountaineering world.
Yep.
And Jackson, could be said as definitely an epicenter for alpinism in the Western U.S. A huge mountain guiding community. And it didn't take long, once I had ski touring equipment, to start figuring out like, oh, well, there's this national park here and you can basically go ski tour anywhere. And so one of the other lift operators, going back to connections, right? Best friend, John, we still talk on a not daily, probably weekly basis. He was from Colorado, and he jokes about, who was this kid from Georgia that showed up to work in Wyoming? Doesn't even have a hat. Doesn't even have a ski hat. And he's skiing around in sunglasses, not goggles. And just tears are running down his face. And so John is someone that basically taught me how to ski. He is a beautiful skier. He telemark skis. He alpine skis. He was someone that I followed around basically on the breaks that we got when we weren't operating the lift. And so I had this very fast-paced sort of, tossed into the deep end learning process of skiing at the resort there, which quickly led to, like I mentioned, wanting to get out and tour into the bigger hills, which then thankfully I recognized like, well, I probably need some more skills, or at least some mentorship or instruction. And so staying on that trajectory, it was, through hike, Knowles course, move to Jackson. Now I'm starting to look at avalanche safety courses. Okay, well, what if something happens? Well, first aid, I need first aid. So what are the credentials there? Wilderness first aid, a wilderness first responder. Never heard of this term until my Knowles course. Oh, Knowles teaches wilderness first responder courses. And so I started checking those boxes. Right. And again, as a 20-year-old, and even looking back, I still can't really articulate what that drive was, or what was this path that I was chasing.
So I get the skiing, and I'm starting to see the slippery slope where you're stacking up credentials, to make it safer for you personally.
Yep.
But also to be like, no, I want to design my life around this. But where's the leap from skiing and ski touring? Because I snowboard. I like snowboarding. I'm less a fan of backcountry snowboarding because of the work involved. Because I need to take my own medicine and do hard things. But I get that part. But mountaineering, whole different animal. Like I barely have scratched the surface. I climbed up my backyard twice in the 2 years we've lived here, and I get out of breath. So what took you from skiing to Everest? Like because you didn't ski Everest down, I don't think, or ski tour up it. So at some point we deviated into like hardcore mountaineering.
Yes.
What was that transition?
I'd like to say it was the path of least resistance.
You can see why I totally don't get that, right? Like,
but being there in Jackson, right? So moving there in the fall, spending my first winter there, getting out into the bigger hills on the ski touring equipment. Spring rolls around, and you're like, well, how do I get up that mountain? All the snow's gone. Okay, well, here we go. We switch into mountaineering boots and crampons and ice axes. And thankfully, right, I did have a lot of these base skills from the Knowles course. It was a mountaineering course. It was an early season mountaineering course. Therefore, we were doing a lot of the moving around on the skis, but learned a lot of the basics, the self-arresting with an ice axe, how to put your crampons on properly, how to manage a rope team through a crevasse field. So as I say, it was, the next step was pretty logical. It was like spring and summer rolled around in the Tetons, and I had to learn those skills.
Was it peer pressure? Like, were other people like Brian, we're climbing, come with us? Or were you like, hey, I want to do that? Who does that? Like what?
So going back to,
Because if you were to say path of least resistance, I think based on my, fifth grade physics, like generally path of least resistance goes downhill.
Correct.
You're going uphill. So you're going the path of most resistance.
For me, it was like, we're
it's
now
like a
shedding
natural
all
flow.
we're shedding all this winter equipment, stripping things down. I was like, this is easy. This is great, right? Now we have a trail to follow. We're not having to break trail and skin through a whole blank canvas of snow. So my buddy John that I mentioned, he's been dragged along, I don't know how many adventures. Thankfully, he's been up for the ride. But there were days I was like, I think we can go climb the Middle Teton. He's like, well, have you been up there? No. Have you been up there? No. I got this guidebook. So that whole summer was filled with, well, let's go try and climb the Middle Teton and then the South Teton and eventually the Grand Teton. And all this was, again, I'm not sure what I was searching for, but I wasn't asking enough questions. That's for sure. Because obviously that summer led to many near misses, a lot of close calls, right? Because suddenly it's a whole new realm of lightning storms, rockfall, moving on summer ice, black ice, dealing with, I mentioned lightning, like weather moving in super fast onto a mountain range. I was like, oh, well, the avalanche safety course didn't prepare me for this. So what's the next step? How do I start to prepare myself? Kind of going back to my mantra, right? How can I suffer in comfort? How can I be moving through the mountains in the summer and feel more comfortable and prepared? And so as you touch on some of these bigger mountains, the only path to enter those iconic mountain ranges, especially as a paid guide, is to start working your way through a guide program, right? So pretty early on, definitely some odd jobs in there, right? Wildland firefighter. I talked about lift operations, construction. I started looking at the American Mountain Guides Association. And I'd been a little bit exposed to that with some folks in the winter realm. And even on my Knowles course, right? Some of the instructors were AMGA certified guides. So it didn't take long for me to start looking into, okay, avalanche safety courses, first aid courses, AMGA courses. And I took my first ski guides course there in the Tetons. I'd mentioned getting the catalog from Jacksonville Mountain Guides. My instructor for my first AMGA ski guides course was the owner of Jacksonville Mountain Guides. Pretty prolific climber, guide instructor, Rob Hess. And so suddenly here I am at 20, now I'm fast forward a little bit, 21 years old.
Ripe old age 21.
Yep, not quite 35. Starting to look at these guide courses, end up taking a ski guides course in the Tetons with the owner of Jacksonville Mountain Guides.
Yeah, when you start talking Rob Hess, now you're starting to get into the elite mountaineer crowd, whether you knew it or not. As a 21-year-old, to him, or to you, that's probably just, it's Rob. He's my instructor.
Yep.
Reality is, no, this guy's rubbing elbows with Conrad, Anchor, and like that whole crew of.
Yeah, I mean, we're talking
big time.
We're talking, a lot of folks know the name Scott Fisher from John Krakauer's Into Thin Air, right? So Scott Fisher and Rob Hess climbing Everest with no oxygen, right? Being the
Rob Hess climbed it with him and no oxygen.
Correct. So
okay,
if I have the numbers correct,
he's decent. He's an okay climber.
Rob summited. He was the third American to climb Everest without O's, and Scott was a couple of seconds behind him. These guys were at the top of their game. These guys were, doing CrossFit before we knew what CrossFit was, and they were taking their Knowles instructor skills, their mountaineering skills, and applying it to these big alpine peaks in the Himalaya. Fast ascents, no support, no O's. Did I know this
And no O's is no oxygen.
No oxygen, correct.
Which when you're at I know I've done free fall jumping, and it's uncomfortable beyond 14,000 feet not having oxygen.
Yeah.
And I was falling down with gravity, which is probably less strenuous than climbing up mountains. So, okay, so you're training with Rob out in Wyoming. When do you go like big time in the sense of now you're climbing and then guiding in Everest and
Well, once I
places
figured
like
out
that?
who Rob was,
This was before Google, so that's hard to do.
Yeah.
You have to ask questions and have social skills.
I mean, thankfully, we suffered in comfort, on that ski guides course, the winter temperatures in the Tetons, right? We were doing snow caves on these courses, camping out, big days in the mountains, temps -20, -30 Fahrenheit. So I got to know Rob, started to figure out like, this guy's legit. This could be a mentor, right? This could be someone that could help sort of lead this path that I've been searching for. In conjunction, my other instructor, another fairly famous guide, especially in the Alps, Joe Vallone, he's based out of France in a smaller town called Le Grave that's quite famous for its technical ski mountaineering and summer alpine routes. So after that ski guides course, basically started knocking on those doors, right? Hey, Rob, Jackson Hole Mountain Guides, how's this work? Internship, apprentice guide. Hey, Joe, what do the French Alps look like?
Had you ever been to Europe before?
I had been to Europe.
Okay.
I had been to Chamonix at 17 years old. And so again, that kind of led into that whole bug of like wanting to be outside and wanting to figure out how to move through mountains. So after that ski guides course, this is a whole nother, it's on theme. Hey, I think I'm going to move to France, sight unseen, no job, no source of income. This guy, Joe, lives there. He was my instructor on my ski guides course. And Doug Coombs, world famous ski guide based in Jackson Hole, Wyoming, like he guides in Le Grave. Like there's something going on over there. So it became this sort of beacon of, well, if I take what I know now and go to Le Grave and apply my skills and hopefully grow my skills and surround myself with amazing people, right? No harm can come of that.
Yep.
So that winter ended up in Le Grave. My wife jokes, she's like, I still can't wait to see the park bench that you talk about when you got off the bus. You knew no one in town. You had your ski bag and duffel bag, and you just stuffed it under this park bench and then walked down the street to the pub because you knew, like, well, there's only a couple of bars in town, and everyone talks about the skiers' lodge and the pub. Come to find out, Joe Vallone is an amazing drummer. And so I walk into the pub, and who do I see? I see my AMGA instructor playing drums.
Right, you hadn't called ahead or anything like that?
Had not called ahead.
Okay. Just you cold called from one continent to another.
Yeah, one of those scratch-off cards on the payphone.
Yeah.
I'm coming. So here I am in France, right? Whole nother adventure. So many stories of that first winter and the folks that I got to surround myself with. I mean, Joe Vallone, Doug Coombs. Under the radar, the Swedish guide really became my mentor, right? And it's not like you kind of often, you can't pick and choose, right? This guy, Martin Svensson, still lives in Chamonix with his wife and family, and talked to him a couple of weeks ago when my wife and I were in Chamonix. So here I am, working under the Swedish guide. And when I say working under, I've got one AMGA course under my belt. And I'm just hanging around the skiers' lodge and thankfully these guys were welcoming me in and letting me sit in the guides meetings and letting me shadow them in the mountains. So basically, Martin's taking out 4 ski clients. Hey, Martin, can I tail guide today? Yeah, absolutely. Mm-hmm. But you're carrying the rope.
I was going to say, so you're just, I was going to say carrying water.
Yeah, carrying water.
Just whatever, hey.
What can I do?
Yep. I love it because it's a lot of your journey is, hey, I start associating with people who are doing what I want to do. They are who
Yeah.
I want to be, and then sort of acclimate and you elevate.
Yep.
No pun intended. And then, and you're willing to do whatever it takes. Definitely not pursuing easy, comfortable.
Right.
But I mean, I'm just thinking about, showing up at Chamonix and like, I'm going to go to the bar and see if anyone I know is there. Because I think, man, I sure hope I got the spelling right. I'm in the right town in France. Otherwise, who knows? You could have met some other really nice people. But, and then the importance of like, finding a mentor, finding someone who's willing to invest in you, and then you being willing to, hey, whatever it takes, man. Like I'll carry ropes, I'll tail guide,
Exactly.
That your dog's not going to walk itself. I got you covered, however that goes.
Yeah. Yeah. So that first winter, again, exposed to so much, so many great experiences. I talked about some of the folks there, Joe and Doug and especially Martin. So coming home, what was home for many years, Jackson, coming back home at that point, summer's rolling around again. So I talked about knocking on those doors. Hey, Joe. Hey, Rob. Jackson Mountain Guides. How does this work? And so here we go again, right? This path of like, Rob became very welcoming, like for sure. Like you're obviously putting in the time. I want to get you on board at Jackson Mountain Guides. You can start as an assistant guide. We'll see what programs we have for you this summer. Could be a Kids Rock program. Could be a Wind River trip. So signed on with Jackson Mountain Guides. About a month into that summer, I got a phone call from the main office manager at the time, Patrick. And he said, hey, Rob has a 4-day Grand Teton next week. Are you available? And before I could even say anything, Patrick's like, I'm not looking for anything other than yes. Ooh, okay.
Dad just drove away from the parking lot again.
Yeah, exactly. Like, okay, well, what does that mean? He's like, well, Rob has 3 clients, and it's a 4-day trip, and it's our flagship program based out of Corbett High Camp, and you're going to guide the Grand Teton with Rob Hess. And that was my first real mountaineering objective as a guide, as a paid guide in the Tetons. And talk about a starting point.
Yeah.
Like,
and yet I don't have a ton of perspective, but I can tell the way you're describing it. Like this is like learning to play an instrument and then being called up to like, headline with some major band. Is like our drummer ate some bad sushi, so you're in. You're like,
I mean, it goes back
you're
to
Metallica.
I think about wrestling in high school. It was like you're at 117 pounds as a freshman. Hey, we need you on varsity next week.
Yeah.
But you're going to wrestle at 125 or 132.
Life doesn't care. This is your challenge. You can cringe. You can,
and there was a lot of that. There was,
or you can just prepare the best you can and go into it and win, lose, or draw.
Yeah,
do your all. So
and talk about fear, or there's so much these days about imposter syndrome, right? Like,
I don't know what you're talking about.
Early 20s, being told, hey, we want to get you on deck next week. 4-day Grand Teton, Rob Hess, can't say no.
And Rob Hess not being just like an average guide, but like one of the...
But like, at the time...
One of the people who got up Everest with no oxygen.
Yeah.
Kind of good.
At the time, I mean, he's been president of the AMGA, the American Mountain Guides Association. He's been technical director, longtime examiner, cycles through being on the board of directors, still owner of Jackson Mountain Guides. So being able to surround myself with not only Rob, but all the other amazing guides at Jackson Mountain Guides, and just that community alone in the Tetons, right? Like, it's pretty high level. And the network, I hope you see this theme, and this is what I often look back on, of like the folks I met on the trail. Ended up going to Alaska because of that. Ended up going to Wyoming because of the folks in Alaska. Ended up going to France because of the folks in Wyoming. And that momentum of, I guess a lot of people look at this theme of like, don't say no, right? Just take the opportunity. And it's hard to do that.
Yeah.
It's so uncomfortable and it's so damn scary.
I have so I have 47 children, but one of them who's a runner, and she has, it's either a sticker on a water bottle or a shirt, but it goes "Start before you're ready."
Yep.
Meaning, like, it's the same concept of when opportunity presents itself and it's aligned with your purpose and your values. Even if you can't articulate, but you're like, this just feels like I should.
Yeah.
Like you get those, but like I'm nervous, I'm scared. To me, that's a lot of times an indicator of like, this is probably something I should stick my neck out there, because you don't grow when you're comfortable. You don't.
Right.
You wouldn't. I mean, you could have settled for a very comfortable, normal life.
Yep.
Doing what's always been done. And there's nothing wrong with that. Like, everyone's got a different journey. So I want to make sure I'm not saying everyone should climb Everest or be a super commando or they're not living. No. Everyone has a different journey. But I love the fact that you're like, yeah, no, I was not actually cool or comfortable with this, but I went and did it.
Really, none of it. I mean, I think back and it's like, hiking the trail, getting off the plane in Anchorage, and getting picked up the next day with the Knowles instructors, driving to Wyoming, right?
Putting your gear under a bench in
I'd
Chamonix.
never seen a snow shovel, growing up in the Alps of the East.
Yeah.
Yeah, so this whole idea of, not really knowing the opportunities that were in front of me, but knowing that you should take this opportunity.
Yeah, love that. You also hit on something too, and I know, we kind of going along here on time, but it's some good stuff. But something else you mentioned was basically that importance of like meeting the right people at the right time. And why I want to highlight that is because that is so what we try to do. I mean, there's kind of the three pillars of StoneWater: working with individual leaders, kind of organic teams, all from the same organization, and then the experiences and expeditions where, really excited to leverage your background, where we bring the NCAA coach, the nonprofit leader, the Marine, she's a pilot, for the Marine. Like, we bring together these different leaders, bring them together, and then watching kind of the shared opportunities and challenges, and they're fun, but they're not easy.
Right.
But as they work through, like, those connections and those sparks start going.
Yeah.
And then what I love is 2 years, I mean, we're running a trip this October where we're going to have people on that trip that were on the very first, before we were even StoneWater, very first event we ever ran. Yeah. And there are people who were on that together are now coming full circle, and we're going to be in the Pacific and on Catalina with them. But it was all about the connections, and then watching them expand and grow. Of course, I think the most meaningful ones are those friendship connections, but then they also open doors and opportunities and lead to phone calls, and it's just cool, that synergy that develops. So I'm going to, just in the interest of time, because I want to get to one last question, so fast forward, you're guiding up Grand Teton. At some point, you do Everest, then you're guiding on Everest. You're no longer sleeping in a park bench in Chamonix, but you're guiding and working out there. You're climbing and guiding Kilimanjaro, Aconcagua. I'm going to mispronounce some of these mountains. And then that's like, Denali, you do that one.
Yep.
Of course, now I'm competing with a garbage truck as we try to have this conversation. And then, Australia and Antarctica, I don't even know what their high points are, but apparently you do those as well. And so you're at the top and you're leading in the field of your choice. And it's amazing. You mentioned before to me, and again, I know I'm power steering here, but you mentioned before, like, as you're mountaineering, now you're married, the goals of, raising a family in Oregon. There's a numbers game to the mountains, starting to go, okay, what else is out there? People are telling you should look into doing leadership development because you've been leading for 20 years now. I mean, more than that, if you count Papa on the trail, having to consult with these 35-year-olds and tell them what the day's legs look like. What brought you to StoneWater? I mean, how did this connection come from your angle? Yeah,
I mean, it's that continuation, right? We were talking about those personal connections, those relationships, the evolution of the doors that they open, right? Rob Hess ushering me into Jacksonville Mountain Guides, right? Martin Svensson helping me become a good ski guide in the Alps, going through AMGA courses and meeting folks from all over, right? Building on those relationships and those networks. I met folks when I was in the Alps.
But I don't know Martin or Rob or any of these people, so I'm trying to connect the dots. I'm just struggling here.
So taking AMGA courses, pretty small world, right? You end up with, a couple of thousand guides spread across the U.S. One of them being Knight Campbell, and
which is the coolest name ever, by the way.
Pretty jealous.
I go, how did I get named Phil? And he's like, Knight
Campbell.
Thanks, Mom and Dad.
Yeah. Who we'll be working with in Catalina.
Yeah, love his organization.
So again, this network in that theme of, hey, if there's an opportunity that feels good and it speaks to the direction you're heading and the things you want to accomplish, don't say no, right? Just like all those networks of, hey, we have this opportunity, like come work on Mount Rainier, come work for International Mountain Guides or Northwest Mountain School, Pro Guiding Service, Alpenglow Expeditions, Himalayan Experience, right? All these doors have opened, but you start to see that we're all sort of taking care of each other. We want to take care of each other. We want your opportunities to become success, and you want your success to become opportunities for me, and vice versa. And so, like you mentioned, right, this numbers game, it's been something I've been fighting as a guide for a really long time. There's only so many days that you can be exposed to avalanches, right? Crevasse falls, helicopters falling out of the sky, crashing in front of you. Issues with high altitude, right? High altitude rescues, body recoveries, that all starts to add up. And so on this search of, okay, what's the next step, right? Continuing on this trajectory.
And to be fair, I mean, I don't want to say maxed out on the mountaineering world, but you've sort of done like
checked a lot of boxes.
After you check, so there's only X amount of the world's tallest, and then and you've done it, and you've guided, and you've led on them. You haven't just done them for yourself recreationally, but like it was your profession and your job.
Yep.
So then it's that, okay, what else?
What else? Yeah, and I've had a lot of people nudging me for a long time about the realm of leadership, team development, coaching.
Which I definitely want to hear, because I want to explore, and this will be down the road, but the stories you have guiding on some of these iconic mountains that tie into that, because I know there's
so many good
awesomeness.
Yeah, so many
but
parallels.
That'll be down the road, because there's a lot of, so many questions and discussions we've had.
Yeah.
And I also really like that you brought up Knight and care and leadership, because one of the values of StoneWater, and this is counterintuitive, I think, to a lot of sort of, business models in the U.S., but it's, if there's other organizations out there that have aligned values and purpose, being they are trying to help develop purpose-driven, value-based leaders using the outdoors and the wild and challenge as a vehicle for that, as well as other things. Like, it's not all about, hey, you need to get outside and go through Class 4 rapids or climb a mountain to learn how to lead. I mean, that's a small aspect of what we do. Yep. It's a fun part, I think, for us. But I love supporting those organizations. And I'm like, I don't really care who gets this contract. What I want is someone to make the difference and move the ball in the right direction. And I kind of went out on a limb with that, Knight being one of the first organizations who immediately people reflect back, right? It's the whole go-giver concept. Like, you try to give more than you receive, and all of a sudden, 9 out of 10 times people try to return the favor. Or maybe it's 9 out of 10 people that I hang out with. Yep. Maybe if I had a different crowd, it'd be different. But I've seen there's several groups. Azimuth Consulting's another one that, these are people that you want to set up for success because of what they do, and you believe in them, and then they try to set you up. And that's how we first connected. Yeah, the first email or text, I don't even remember what it was Knight going, oh, Phil, Brian, Phil, exactly. Like, you guys should talk.
Yeah. Yeah, and it's that reciprocity, right? That idea, and that's very much ingrained to the guide world, right?
That's so cool. I didn't know that. It's not competitive. Like, no, I want your clients.
Sure, businesses compete, but at the end of the day, guide service offers trips in the Tetons. This guide service operates, on Kilimanjaro or focuses on the Himalaya, etc. And a lot of times it's availability, right? Like, oh, maybe I'll go work over here with a certain clientele, or, hey, I'm out of town this week, and hey, Phil, are you available, right? So yeah,
Love it.
being in touch with folks like Knight, not only knowing him through guides courses in the AMGA, knowing that he has some background with, military, and again, that connection of, hey, talk to this guy, Phil. He's up in Oregon. I think you guys
He needs help.
we all need help.
The closest he's been to the Himalayas is the Yeti ride in, Disneyland or Disney World.
But ultimately, it again, I hope you see the theme here. It was like this opportunity happened. You and I started chatting. We were meant to have a 20-minute phone call, video call at first. I think we might have
kind of like this was going to be a 15-minute podcast.
We might have tapped out at 2.5 hours or something. And yeah, you when it feels right and it aligns with not only your vision but other people around you and their vision that's on the same trajectory, it's hard to say no.
Yeah.
Right. And I've had these hard nudges, not only from my wife and my family and longtime clientele, but ultimately someone of your stature, right?
About 6'1", 200 pounds. Yeah.
Similar stories, different realms.
Same principles.
Hopefully the same principles.
Yeah.
And after, numerous conversations, I think we joked, right? Like, hey, Phil, I've never interviewed for a position on a paddleboard.
Yeah.
And, you say, well, I've never interviewed anyone in board shorts. And right there, I was like, this is great. This is amazing. And this whole idea of what StoneWater provides and the programs and the takeaways, right? And ultimately, what I've become over the years is as an educator, right? I'm an educator at heart. I love seeing people grow. I love seeing people push themselves, just like you do, right? We want to see these clients succeed, and these clients then become friends. They become family. You're not only bettering them, but you're ultimately bettering yourself.
Yeah, absolutely. And I would argue that's a big reason I do what I do is because it makes me better.
Yeah.
Physically, mentally, spiritually, emotionally, as a leader, as a parent. It's really hard to be working with a client individually or a leadership team or a group of different leaders together and be talking about purpose-driven, value-based leadership and what's it look like and how do we do it and how do we forge it and how it permeates personal and professional life, and then turn around and divorce yourself from that.
Right.
It's like you can't.
You can't.
And a matter of fact, when you start deviating from it, you're like, wait a second, I'm not being consistent and authentic.
Right.
Like I need to, I find myself half the time working with some of our coaching clients, and I'm like, yeah, just I'm basically talking to myself out loud right now. I'm asking you the same questions I'm asking myself, and to the point of imposter syndrome. I love the fact that you look at Seneca, this Stoic philosopher and writer back in the day, prolific writer, and he's writing to one of his mentees. I think that's what you call someone you're mentoring. So he's writing to Lucius, one of his mentees, and he's like, hey, just so this isn't like a doctor-patient relationship. This is like you're a patient in that stretcher over there. I'm over here. We're just trying to figure it out together. Yeah. And I love that humble growth mindset dynamic, and the fact that, hey, we're working on purpose-driven, value-based leadership. We're trying to build your self-awareness, your self-leadership, knowing that you will grow as a leader. Mm-hmm. And we're not really, it's not that we don't see value in P&L statements, and it's not like we don't care about the business. We just know if we get this right and we do it right, then your longevity and impact over time will ensure you're going to be fine financially and business-wise. And I've seen a lot of people instead chasing numbers, and they're like a dog chasing its tail. Like, they get it for now. You can get short-term gain, but it flashes out if that's your driving factor. So it's been really neat, and I love that you see that. I also love in the aspect of the 100-mile woods or the 100-mile wilderness, like that whole take that big first step, like taking the step to come into StoneWater, because it started just like that. My 100-mile wilderness was hey, you have a comfortable job working with good people, doing good stuff. You're going to step away from that with a wife in med school, with 8 kids who call you dad, in an area you're totally new to, and you're going to start a business, your own, and that was StoneWater's genesis. And it was, I barely got off the boats and they were already burning. And I'm like, okay, failure's not an option. I've got 9 people looking at me to help support them. How do we do this, do it well, and make it work?
Right.
And, fast forward a little over a year later, now we've got this super cool team, and it's evolving and growing. And now the challenge is, hey, let's make sure we're growing this the right, smart way. So blessed and honored to have you on the team. I really mean that. And call it fate, call it God, call it the universe, whatever you want. I think, things happen for a reason.
For sure.
And excited to kind of keep unpacking, your story down the road, on different, podcasts and little releases that we'll just do what Carlos tells us to do, but it'll be good. So, thanks so much, man. I appreciate it.
Yeah, I'm really looking forward to the future. And again, loving the trajectory. Yeah, looking forward to the impact, right?
Yeah. It's good, and it's not just for folks we work with and teams we work with, but it's us as well. So it's the beauty of it. I mean, I'm sure every time you guided, even if it's a summit you've done multiple times, those hard days make you better. So excited for the what is it? The suffering and comfort.
Suffering and comfort.
All right, I'm taking that. That's my big takeaway. That and the 100-mile wilderness and Dad just driving away, and it's like, all right, it's on you now. Figure it out. Love it. Awesome, man.
No turning back now.
Cool. Well, thanks so much.
Yep, thank you.